Hello, sleepy soul. The night is quiet, the world is asleep, and something is waiting in the dark. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and write your country and current time in the comments. Now listen carefully. Rain pattered against the office windows, soft, persistent. Neon from the street below flickered across my keyboard, casting fractured colors onto my fingers. I sipped lukewarm coffee, barely tasting it, feeling the ache in my chest that had settled there after the divorce. My apartment felt lonelier than ever, cold in ways even the heater couldn't touch. I had moved here to rebuild. A new city, a new job, a fresh start. And yet, each morning I noticed it, one desk always immaculate, always empty. No one claimed it, no one sat there. And yet, the air around it felt different, charged. I tried to ignore it. It's just cleaning staff, I told myself. But nights, when I stayed late to finish reports, I'd hear it. The faint tap of keys, soft, deliberate, like someone typing notes I shouldn't see. I convinced myself I was imagining it. Isolation does that. Loneliness whispers. Then came the first note. A post-it on my monitor. You left your scarf at the cafe yesterday. I froze. I hadn't told anyone I went to the corner cafe, nor had I left a scarf behind. I stared at it, shaking my head. I'm overthinking it, I told myself. Someone's messing with me. Weeks passed. The typing continued. Notes appeared, small, benign things at first. Your coffee is cold. The window was open last night. I rationalized. I wanted to believe it was coincidence, paranoia, the residue of heartbreak and therapy sessions and nights spent alone. Then he or she appeared. A new employee joined the floor mid-November. Quiet, calm, observant. A gentle voice that didn't startle, didn't demand. When they smiled, it felt safe, comforting, something I hadn't felt in months. I told myself it was just relief to have someone friendly. You always stay late, they said, almost casually. I've noticed. I blinked. How it? I usually grab a drink around 7. You're still here. Their eyes weren't prying, just knowing. I laughed nervously. I work better when it's quiet. They nodded. I get that. Me too. And just like that, I began letting them in. Coffee breaks, lunches, subtle conversations about life, books, playlists. Everything felt easy, safe. I started believing in trust again, in the possibility of normal connection, until the details got too specific. One rainy evening, as I left the office, they handed me a coffee. I know you like it without sugar. From last Wednesday, you were reading Hemingway. My fingers went numb. Impossible. I hadn't mentioned the book. I hadn't ordered the coffee. Not to them. Not ever. I don't remember telling you. My voice wavered. They smiled softly, watching me. You didn't. But I noticed. I laughed it off, trembling inside. I wanted to believe it made sense. Maybe they had a photographic memory. Maybe I was being paranoid. But the unease grew. Files on my shared drive, open, saved with notes I didn't write. My routines, tracked, mirrored, anticipated. My dating app messages, read, commented on before I even responded. I told myself I was overthinking. I rationalized. I needed to believe in the comfort I felt. One night, alone in the office, the typing started again. Slow at first, then deliberate. I followed the sound. The empty desk. A chair untouched, cold. No one there. My phone buzzed. A voice note. Did you finish your report? It was my own voice. Recorded yesterday. I hadn't sent it. I hadn't saved it. Panic threaded through me. I froze, listening. Outside, rain drummed the sidewalks. A car passed, brakes squealing. Footsteps on the floor above. The hum of the fridge in the break room. And then typing again. From the empty desk. I started checking cameras. Nothing. No one had been there. And yet, I felt eyes. Watching, observing everywhere. I tried confronting the new employee. Calm, rational. Do you know about the desk? They looked at me, expression soft, almost empathetic. I've noticed it too, they said. It's strange. Always empty, yet present. Some people forget. Some people remember. I laughed bitterly. What does that even mean? They leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. You remember? That's the difference. And suddenly the pieces slotted together like knives. Years ago, a colleague had vanished. No records, no HR files, no trace. But I remembered them. Lively, sharp, quietly funny, taken from us in silence, erased from memory, like they had never existed. Everyone else forgot. Everyone else moved on. And now here, in my office, watching, waiting, I realized with chilling clarity, the empty desk wasn't empty. And the new employee, the comforting presence, had known. Knew. Every routine, every habit, every crack in my solitude. I ran, out of the office, into the rain-soaked streets. Neon reflected on puddles, distorted and jagged, like memory itself. I checked my phone. Messages I didn't send. Photos I didn't take. Metadata tracking every movement, every heartbeat. For weeks, I tried to rationalize. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe it wasn't them. But then notes appeared on my doorstep, perfectly folded, written in my handwriting. Don't forget me. I called the police. Evidence. Screenshots. Cameras. Logs. They didn't fully understand the psychological invasion, the subtle stalking, the erasure of reality itself. But they listened. They acted. Forensic analysts traced emails, tracking voice notes, burner phones, AI cloned messages, the web of obsession. Confrontation came quietly. I met them in the office after hours, calm, observant, everything I feared, yet utterly composed. I just wanted to be remembered, they said, voice soft, almost mournful. And you remembered me. I shook. You can't do this. You can't manipulate people like this. Erase boundaries. Invent lives inside their homes. They tilted their head. You think I invented? Or maybe I just continued what was never finished. You're alive. You remember. That's enough. The police arrived soon after. Evidence, logs, messages. The office desk cleared. The presence gone. I survived. And yet, the emptiness remained. At night, I hear echoes of typing in dreams. The office hums in memory. Rain taps windows I no longer see. Neon flashes distorted in my mind. And I wonder still about the fragility of memory. About trust. About how easily identity can be manipulated, boundaries breached, and solitude weaponized. We survived, but the remembering, it lingers. And sometimes, in the quiet of my apartment, listening to distant jazz, I think, the empty desks aren't empty. They never really are. Story 2. I took the night job because I needed silence. Not the kind that feels peaceful. The kind that makes your own thoughts sound distant. After the breakup, my apartment felt too alive with memory. Every mug in the cabinet. Every missing toothbrush. The dent in the mattress where someone used to sleep like they had a right to my future. So when the temp agency offered me an overnight records job in a downtown office tower, I said yes without asking too many questions. The building was old enough to have moods. It stood between a bank and a closed cafe with fogged windows and a dead neon sign that buzzed all night like a tired insect. Rain glossed the sidewalks. The city looked washed out after dark. Reflections slid across the glass doors when I came in at 10:45 p.m., my coat damp, my shoulders tight, my phone buzzing with nothing important. Another dating app notification. Another message I would not answer. The lobby smelled like wet wool and floor cleaner. On the 12th floor where I worked, the air was colder. The lights were dimmed to a low corporate glow. Desks sat in rows like they were waiting for an apology. There was a soft hum from the vents, and somewhere behind the walls, a machine ticked with the patient rhythm of something keeping time. My supervisor for the night shift was a woman named Nora. She was the first person in weeks who looked at me like I was fully there. Not broken, not temporary, not somebody in the process of disappearing. She had a calm voice and careful eyes. She spoke softly, like she knew that loudness could feel like a threat. She showed me where the coffee was, where the emergency exits were, where the logbook lived. Usually it's just the two of us after midnight, she said, handing me a spare key card. If anything feels off, come get me. I almost laughed at that. Everything felt off lately, but she smiled in a way that made me want to trust her. I wanted to believe it. The logbook sat beside the security terminal at an empty desk near the glass wall. It was a thick black book with a cracked spine and pages that had begun to curl at the corners. The nameplate beside it read Voss/Night Operations. I asked Nora about him. She looked at the desk for a second too long. Evan's been here longer than the building's been honest, she said. It sounded like a joke. It wasn't. At 11:13 p.m., I heard typing from the far end of the floor. Not the sharp, efficient tapping of someone writing emails. This was slower, deliberate, almost careful. I looked up from my screen and saw the empty desk glowing under the monitor light. A coffee cup sat beside the keyboard. The logbook lay open. No one was there. I told myself I'd missed someone leaving. Maybe I was overthinking it. The rain tapped against the windows. A siren drifted somewhere far below. I stood, walked to the desk, and found a fresh entry in the logbook. 11:08, Nora brought tea. She says the new girl looks tired. 11:11, she was reading her phone again. She still checks the old messages. 11:12, her left hand shakes when she lies. ***. My left hand was shaking. I stared at the page until the lines blurred. Across the floor, Nora was on a call near the printer. Her reflection moved faintly in the dark glass. She turned, caught me looking, and gave a small, apologetic smile, like she understood too much. When she came over, I showed her the page. She didn't seem surprised. "Sometimes Evan writes things before he hears them," she said. "That's not funny. I'm not joking." Her tone stayed gentle. That made it worse. I wanted to ask her if she had written the entry, if this was some kind of initiation prank. But there was something about the way she held my gaze, like she was studying whether I could be managed. So I let it go. I told myself it made sense. Around midnight, the building grew quieter. The hum of the vents deepened. The lights seemed to thin out, like the darkness was leaning closer to listen. I checked my phone. A voice note from my ex flashed across the screen. I had blocked him 2 months ago. The sender name was not his. It was a blank profile with no photo. I didn't open it. Then the phone buzzed again. A message from an account with no follower count, no posts, and a username that looked almost like mine. "You look thinner today." My stomach went cold. I turned the screen off and tucked the phone into my pocket, but I could still feel it vibrating there like a trapped insect. At 12:40 a.m., Nora brought me coffee. Black, no sugar. I had never told her how I took it. I stared at the cup. "How did you know?" She blinked once, then smiled with a kind of tired softness that almost made me feel silly. "You leave the packets untouched. That could mean anything." "It could," she said, "but it doesn't." She sat on the edge of the desk across from me, not too close, not too far. Perfect distance. Safe distance. The kind people use when they want you to keep talking. "You've been through something," she said. I looked away. I don't mean to pry, but she was prying. Quietly. Expertise without aggression. The worst kind. I wanted to believe she was just observant. Maybe I was overthinking it. She asked where I'd moved from. She asked if I liked the city yet. She asked if I was sleeping, not in a nosy way, in a way that made me answer. And each answer seemed to matter to her more than it should have. By 1:15, the logbook had another entry. She still uses the old playlist when she wants to feel safe. The one with the rain on the window. The one he used to hate. ***. My breath caught. No one knew that. Not Nora. Not my ex. Not even my sister, who had called me twice a week since I moved and who still believed I was doing better. I had made that playlist the night before I left. It was full of soft jazz and city rain and songs that did not remind me of anyone else. I had played it once, in my apartment, while packing boxes in silence. I closed the logbook and looked toward the security cameras. There were 6 feeds on the monitor. Every one of them showed the empty desk, and every one of them showed Nora, sitting there, typing. No matter which camera angle I chose, the same scene repeated. Same posture, same hands, same low halo of desk light. The same person, captured from too many impossible positions at once. I zoomed in. Her face blurred for a second, then sharpened. The eyes were not exactly the same. One feed showed a tiny scar near her hairline. Another didn't. One showed chipped polish on her thumb. Another had clean nails. It was so subtle I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. Almost. At 2:03 a.m., I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring 3 times before answering. The voice on the other end sounded like mine. Not exactly, but close enough to make the room tilt. "Don't make a scene," it said. I said nothing. There was a soft crackle in the line. Breathing. Then quieter. "You don't have to be scared. We only keep people who cooperate." The call ended. My skin had gone cold and tight. I went to Nora's desk, but she wasn't there. I checked the bathroom, the break room, the stairwell, the hall beyond the elevators, where the carpet muffled my steps until even my breathing sounded borrowed. The floor was empty. Then I heard typing again. From the records room. I pushed the door open. Inside, the shelves stood in long, neat rows. Boxes, files, dust. The air smelled like paper and bleach. At the far end of the room, under a lone swinging light, Nora sat at a terminal I had never seen before. She looked up like she had been expecting me. "You shouldn't be back here," she said. There was no fear in her voice. Only regret. Soft. Practiced. "What is this?" I whispered. She glanced at the terminal. On the screen was a file with my name on it. Not my full legal name. The one my mother used. The one I had not heard in years. "How do you know that?" I said. Nora's expression changed. Just a little, like something behind her had shifted. "Because you're easier to calm when I use the right version of you." I took a step back. The records room door clicked shut behind me. Not slammed, just closed. Deliberately. "Nora," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Open the door." She didn't move. Instead, she turned the screen toward me. There were folders. Hundreds of them. Each one marked with initials. Some with photos. Some with dates. Some with entries from people I did not know. There were audio files, screenshots, scraped social media profiles, copies of emails, phone metadata, device logs, location pings. And in the corner of the screen, a line of text. "Replacement cycle, active." I stared at it. "What does that mean?" Nora looked tired now. Not cruel, not angry. Worse than either. "It means the building keeps what it needs." The words did not make sense. Then she opened another folder. My breath stopped. Inside were video clips. The same woman. The same desk. Different names in the file titles. Different dates. Different clothes. Same face. Or almost the same face. Each clip showed a person gradually changing over a period of nights. A mole appearing near the mouth. A scar fading. A voice a little flatter. A smile that didn't belong to the previous version. Copies. Not in the supernatural sense. Not some impossible cloning chamber. In the ordinary, human sense that made my stomach turn harder. Lookalikes. Burners. Deepfake audio. Edited footage. Forged email chains. People recruited, paid, threatened, trained to mimic the original until the original was no longer necessary. The building wasn't haunted. It was organized. It was a machine made of people. Nora swallowed before speaking again. "Evan figured it out. He tried to leave. Evan is real." Her eyes shifted away. That was answer enough. I backed into a filing cabinet. Metal banged against my shoulder. "Where is he?" Nora's mouth tightened. "You've been talking to him all night." Everything in me went still. The logs. The tea. The voice note. The camera feeds. A memory flickered through my head. The way Nora had first said his name. Not as if referring to a man. As if referring to a function. "Evan isn't one person," she said. "That's the point. No one here is, after long enough." A floorboard creaked outside the room. Then another. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Approaching the door. Nora stood very still. "Don't let them hear you panicking," she whispered. "They prefer calm people." The handle turned. I bolted. The records room door slammed open behind me as I ran down the hall, past the dark conference room, past the vending machines with their dead blue glow, toward the stairwell. My shoes slapped the carpet. My heart hit my ribs so hard it hurt. A voice called after me. Not Nora's. Mine. Wait. I didn't stop. In the stairwell, the air was cold and metallic. Each landing echoed with my footsteps and one other set just behind them, always the same distance away. I pushed through the door to the lobby and nearly collided with the security guard at the front desk. He looked up, and for one terrible second, I thought it was Evan. Same eyes, same careful face. Then he smiled, and I saw the difference. A little too gentle, a little too blank. I ran outside into the rain. The city hit me all at once. Neon bleeding across puddles, cars hissing through wet streets, a bus groaning at the corner, the cafe across the road still dark behind fogged glass. My phone buzzed again and again in my pocket, but I didn't look. I kept running until I reached the convenience store 2 blocks away and called the police from under the yellow awning, breathing hard, shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. At first, they sounded skeptical. Then I read them the file titles. Then I sent them screenshots. Then the unknown number called again and left a voice note. My own voice. I'm in the building. I'm not where you think I am. The officer on the line went quiet. 10 minutes later, cars arrived with lights flashing across the rain. They found the records room, the hidden terminal, the burner phones, the network of fake accounts, the copied badges, the audio files, the edited footage, the names, so many names. They found 3 people in the building who were not supposed to be there. One of them was Evan, or the current version of him. He was alive, terrified, exhausted. He said he had been told he was filling in for someone else 6 months ago and had never been allowed to leave after midnight. He said every night he wrote in the logbook because the entries were the only way to keep track of who was still himself. I believed him. That was the worst part, because I understood exactly what it felt like to be edited by someone else. The investigation took weeks. The company denied everything. Nora vanished before the second search warrant. My apartment remained silent, but not comforting anymore. Silence had changed shape. Now it felt like an audience. I still hear typing sometimes when the city is especially quiet. In cafes, in hotel lobbies, in the hum of my own refrigerator at 2 a.m. I still check reflections in windows without meaning to. I still glance at the names on my phone twice before opening a message. Some nights, I open the old playlist. Rain on the window, soft jazz, distant sirens swallowed by the dark. I play it because I need to remember who I was before the building started rewriting people. Before I learned how easy it is to manufacture trust. Before I understood that the most dangerous thing in the world is not always a stranger in the dark. Sometimes it is a system that learns your routines, your silences, your grief, and then builds a copy of you so convincing that even you start to doubt the original. Trust is not just a feeling, it is a boundary, and once something learns how to cross it quietly, there is no version of safety that feels exactly the same again. Story 3. The first time the printer woke me up, it was 12:07 a.m. My apartment was quiet in the way only new places are quiet. Not peaceful, just empty. The radiators clicked in the walls. Rain tapped the window with a patient, nervous rhythm. Somewhere below me on the street, a car passed through a puddle and hissed away into the dark. I sat up in bed and reached for my phone. No missed calls, no messages. Then I heard it again. Not in the apartment. In my head, maybe. A thin mechanical sound. Paper feeding through rollers. I lived alone now. 3rd floor. 1 bedroom. A narrow kitchen with a humming fridge, and a sink that never quite stopped dripping unless I twisted the tap too hard. I had moved to the city 6 weeks earlier after the divorce papers were signed, after the apartment in Queens was emptied, after the last argument that ended with my ex-husband telling me I was too sensitive to survive alone. Maybe he was right, at least about the alone part. I got up, wrapped myself in a sweatshirt, and stared at my laptop on the desk. A notification sat on the screen. Printer Q, one new document. I frowned. I did not own a printer. I lived on the top edge of a little co-working office in a converted warehouse near Canal Street. My apartment shared a wall with the building next door, and the office downstairs used the same old network infrastructure. I had spent the last few weeks designing case studies for a small consulting firm, mostly from home, mostly in silence. The printer notification made no sense. I clicked it. A file opened automatically. The first page was blank except for a header at the top. Maya Singh, 08:14 a.m. Lobby. Elevator mirrors. Don't look at your phone when you hear the music. Asterisk, asterisk. I stared at the page until the words blurred. My throat tightened. I read it again. Then I scrolled. Page 2. Maya Singh, 09:26 a.m. The man in the gray coat will hold the door. He will say, "You dropped this, even though you didn't. Do not take the key card." Asterisk, asterisk. Page 3. Maya Singh, 11:40 a.m. You will think this is a prank. You will tell yourself there is an explanation. You will be wrong. Asterisk, asterisk. My skin went cold. I slammed the laptop shut. For a while I just sat there, listening to the rain and my own breathing. The radiator clicked. Somewhere in the apartment next door, a pipe groaned. A distant siren moved through the city and disappeared. When morning came, I almost convinced myself I had dreamt the whole thing. Almost. At 8:13, I stepped into the lobby of my building and heard music. Soft jazz. Faint. Old and warm, bleeding through the elevator speakers. My stomach dropped. The elevator mirrors caught my reflection in slices. Pale face. Damp hair. A woman who looked older than she had 2 months ago. Then the man in the gray coat held the door. He smiled and said, "You dropped this." I looked down. Nothing. My hand hovered over my phone. I remembered the page. The warning. The stupid, impossible sentence. Do not take the key card. He had one in his other hand. A security badge. I shook my head. That's not mine. His expression didn't change. Are you sure? I left the lobby by the side entrance and walked the 6 blocks to the office in the rain, my pulse beating too fast. By the time I got to my desk, my hands were trembling so badly I spilled half my coffee onto the form I was filling out. At 11:40 a.m., I told myself I was being ridiculous. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Did you make it to work?" I stared at it. Then another. "You always tap the side of your cup twice before you drink coffee." I put the phone down so hard it rattled against the desk. I looked around the office. Open plan. Cheap plants. Low conversation. A printer humming in the back room. Nothing felt dangerous in the ordinary daylight, but my body didn't care. My body remembered things before my mind agreed to them. It remembered closed doors, low voices, the sense of being watched and told it was love. I told myself it was a scam, a wrong number, data scraped from somewhere. Maybe I was overthinking. At lunchtime I opened the office chat and searched for the gray-coated man. No one by that name. No badge access log I could see. I started to laugh, then stopped because I wasn't laughing. That evening, when I got home, another document was waiting in the queue. Maya Singh, 7:12 p.m. He will stand outside your building in the rain and pretend he is waiting for a ride. Don't invite him in. He is not lost. Asterisk, asterisk. I stood very still in my kitchen. The fridge hummed. The faucet dripped. I went to the window and looked down. Across the street, under a broken awning, a man in a gray coat stood with his head bowed. He looked up. Even from 3 floors up, I felt the recognition like a finger pressed against the back of my neck. The next morning I called in sick. I spent the day blocking unknown numbers, changing passwords, logging out of everything. By noon I had convinced myself that I was being hunted by some piece of stupid modern life. A stalker, maybe, or a phishing campaign that had become personal by accident. Then I found the email. It came from my old address. The subject line was simple. "You left this behind." Inside was a voice note. "No sender name." No avatar. Just an audio file. I almost deleted it. Instead I pressed play. A woman's voice filled my kitchen. Not mine. Not exactly. But close enough to make my stomach turn. "Maya," it said softly. "You always say you can sleep later, but you never do." The voice paused. Then, in the smallest shift in the breath between syllables, I heard my ex-husband. Not his words, not his voice, just the shape of it, the cadence, the practiced gentleness he used when he wanted me to doubt my own fear. My hands went numb. The note continued. "You should check the printer, Q." That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark with the phone in my hand, while rain dragged silver lines down the window. At 12:01 a.m., the printer pinged again. My laptop was on. I hadn't opened it. A new document. This time, the pages were different. Not predictions. Reports. A timestamp. A location. A list of actions. March 19th, 9:12. Subject entered lobby. March 19th, 9:26. Subject declined keycard. March 19th, 11:40. Subject received first contact from burner number. March 19th, 1912. Subject located gray-coded mail. No direct engagement. Asterisk asterisk. I went cold all over. At the bottom of the last page was a line that made me sit down on the floor. "This record has been copied from Office A, Sublevel 2. I had never heard of Sublevel 2. I spent the next day searching the building plans online. Nothing useful. I asked the receptionist downstairs if there was another office level beneath us. She looked at me strangely. No basement, just storage. At 6:30 p.m., I stayed after everyone left. The office was dim and full of low electric noise. Monitors slept in rows. The printer sat in the back room under a strip light, beige and ordinary, its tray half open like a mouth. I opened the internal network settings. There was another device connected. Printer AUX. No IP address I recognized. I clicked it. A folder opened. Inside were scanned pages. Hundreds of them. Reports. Logs. Attendance sheets. Calendar prints. Screenshots of email threads. Social media captures. Photos taken through windows. All labeled with employee names. Some were dead. Some were not. I found mine. My file went back 11 months. Before I moved. Before the divorce. Before the city. There were images of me in my old apartment. Kitchen. Couch. Bathroom mirror. One photo showed my ex-husband asleep on the sofa, his face blurred by low light. Another captured me at my desk, staring at a laptop, tears on my face. At the bottom was a note. Subject stable after intervention. Continue monitoring, asterisk asterisk. I felt as if the room had tilted. The office behind me was silent except for the hum of the vending machine and a distant elevator cable shifting in the shaft. My breathing sounded too loud. Too close. I kept scrolling. There were multiple victim profiles. Different names. Different timelines. Same structure. Comforting contact. Escalating knowledge. Emotional destabilization. Identity erosion. And one repeated signature. Not a name. A tag. A Voss. The next page was a photograph of a man standing in a server room, his face half turned away. Dark hair. Thin frame. Gray coat draped over one arm. Behind him on a wall monitor was a mirror image of our own office floor. Below the image. A Voss is not an employee. A Voss is a construct maintained through access, mimicry, and trust extraction. I sat down hard. The building creaked around me, old wood and old pipes. Somewhere far below, a door slammed. Then footsteps in the hallway outside the office. Slow. Measured. I didn't move. The footsteps stopped at the door. A knock. 3 soft taps. My phone buzzed in my hand. Unknown number. You found the wrong room. My vision narrowed. I backed away from the door and saw my own reflection in the black office window. Pale face, open mouth, a woman being watched from both sides of the glass. The lock clicked. Not from the door. From the ceiling. A panel slid open above the printer with a metallic scrape. and a voice came out of the dark speaker hidden inside it. Calm, familiar, intimate. Maya, it said, you never should have looked into sublevel 2. I knew that voice, not because I had heard it before today, because I had recorded it in my life. My ex-husband, or something made from him. I ran. The hallway was dim and smelled faintly of dust and toner. My shoes slapped against the concrete. The emergency exit alarm began to shriek behind me as I shoved through the stairwell door and took the stairs 2 at a time, my hands skidding on the rail. Below me, another door opened. Footsteps followed, not rushed, certain. Outside, the rain hit me like cold static. I pushed into the street and called 911 with shaking fingers. My voice broke before I finished the address. I kept moving, head down, through neon reflections and passing headlights and the wet shine of storefront windows. Every man in a gray coat looked like the same man. Every parked car felt occupied. The police arrived 20 minutes later. One officer listened while I spoke in fragments. Printer Q, hidden floor, voice note, photos. The others searched the office with a flashlight. They found the printer room. Then they found the stairwell to sublevel 2. It had been sealed behind a false wall. Inside was a second office, not abandoned, active, monitors, hard drives, labeled files, surveillance feeds from apartments, cafes, elevators, lobbies. My building, my street, my old home, my divorce lawyer's office, and on one screen, my apartment live. The officer swore under his breath. In the center of the room sat a printer identical to mine. Its tray was full, still warm. They arrested a man in the basement server corridor an hour later, though even then I wasn't sure he was the only one. He gave a false name at first, then another. His real identity, they told me later, had been assembled across years. Multiple jobs, multiple cities, multiple women, a pattern of emotional entry, digital saturation, slow isolation. He used cloned voices to sound familiar. He used metadata to sound psychic. He used the hidden office to make the past appear to predict the future. It was never prophecy. It was documentation. He had been printing what happened in a version of the building no one was supposed to know existed. A version where I had already been observed. A version where trust had already been studied like a weak semen fabric. The case spread quietly at first, then all at once. Other victims came forward. Some cried. Some did not. Some said they had suspected for years. Some said they had only felt lonely until the loneliness started speaking back. I moved again 2 weeks later. A smaller apartment. Better locks. No shared walls. I changed my number, my email, my passwords. I turned off location services. I stopped answering unfamiliar calls. I learned the shape of my own fear, how it sharpened around ordinary things. Printer noises, elevator music, the faint buzz of a phone on a wooden table. Sometimes late at night, I still wake up when rain taps the window. Sometimes I remember the pages, not because they were true, because they were intimate. And that is the part no one tells you about being watched. It is not only the threat, it is the attention, the terrible, degrading knowledge that someone has spent time becoming familiar with you without your permission, that they have memorized your habits and worn your life like a key, that they have turned your private self into a map. I used to think safety was a door that locked. Now I think it is stranger than that. Safety is a boundary no one has touched yet. It is the space between a voice and your name. It is the right to remain unrecorded. And maybe that is why the printer still haunts me in dreams. The soft mechanical sound, the white page sliding out into the dark, carrying a version of my life that I did not consent to live. Because obsession does not always begin with violence. Sometimes it begins with proof. Sometimes it begins with someone, somewhere, knowing too much. And sometimes the most frightening thing in the world is not that the future can be predicted. It is that your privacy can be stolen so completely that even your past starts to look like evidence. Story 4. I moved to the city in the rain. That is how it felt, anyway. Like the weather had followed me here on purpose. The kind of rain that turned the streets into black glass and lit every window with a bruised reflection of neon. I carried 2 suitcases into a one-room apartment above a bakery that never seemed to sleep, and I stood by the window listening to the refrigerator hum and the pipes tick in the walls and the soft jazz drifting up from the cafe across the street. It had been 6 weeks since Mara left. Not all at once. That would have been cleaner. She left in pieces, in cold sentences, in the way she looked through me at the end, as if I had become a room she no longer rented. I had started answering emails with my name and then deleting them, because seeing it there made me feel like a stranger. I had come to the city for a new job and a new start, which was the kind of phrase people use when they do not want to say they are running. The office was on the 12th floor of a gray building between a pharmacy and a dry cleaner. Nothing dramatic. Fluorescent lights. Carpet that always felt slightly damp in the morning. A break room with a microwave that clicked louder than it should have. A coffee machine that groaned like an old man waking up. On my 3rd day, I noticed the rule. Never eat lunch in the break room after 1:17 p.m., said a woman named Celia, without looking up from her salad. I laughed because I thought she was joking. No one laughed back. The table went quiet in that strange, managed way offices go quiet when people are pretending not to notice something. A man named Arjun folded his napkin. Someone turned the page of a magazine too slowly. I'm serious, Celia said. After 1:17, just don't. Is that a fire code thing? Something like that, she said. Her tone was gentle. Too gentle. Not secretive. Just final. I told myself it was one of those workplace oddities that accumulates in buildings where no one wants to explain the real reason for anything. A superstition. A prank that had become tradition. I wanted to believe it was harmless. That first week, I stayed in my apartment most nights and ate takeout on the floor because I had not yet bought a table. I would sit with my back against the wall, listening to footsteps in the hall outside, the elevator cables whining faintly, the rain tapping the fire escape. My phone buzzed with messages from people I no longer had the energy to answer. My ex's name still appeared sometimes in old photo memories. It felt like being haunted by a version of myself I could not rescue. At work, everyone was kind in a careful way, the kind of kindness that keeps its distance. Then on a Thursday, a new hire arrived. His name was Daniel. He was quiet, neat, and almost unnaturally attentive. The sort of man who made eye contact at exactly the right moments. He remembered names immediately. He noticed the little things. When I spilled coffee on my sleeve, he handed me a stack of napkins before I asked. When the office AC made me shiver, he said, "You always look like you're about 10 minutes from freezing." I blinked. "Sorry," he added. "You mentioned it in passing yesterday. The cold." I had, maybe. I did not remember saying it to him. He smiled as if he had not meant to reveal that he was listening. It should have unsettled me more than it did. But I was lonely. Loneliness has a way of making caution feel like a luxury. Daniel sat with me at lunch sometimes. He asked careful questions, not nosy ones. Better than that, questions that made me feel seen. "You moved here alone?" "Yes." "Harder than it looks." I nodded. He looked at my untouched sandwich and said almost softly, "You don't like mustard. You pick it off." I stared at him. "I saw you do it on Monday," he said. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe being known felt invasive only because I was not used to it anymore. Still, there were small things. He knew the name of the cheap coffee shop on my street before I told him. He knew I had once lived in a smaller town by a river. He mentioned that I used to like a band called Slow Vale, which I had not played in years. When I asked how he knew, he said, "You have a playlist on your public profile. Old songs leave a trail." I told myself it made sense. Then he called me by an old nickname. Not my name. Not something obvious. A name Mara used to say when she was affectionate. When she wanted to soften me. Nobody at the office should have known that. I laughed too quickly and said, "That is not a real nickname." Daniel's expression did not change. People only say that when they are embarrassed to remember. He said it like he was comforting me. The break room rule stayed in place, and I began to notice how everyone tracked the time. No matter where they were, after 1:10 p.m., their eyes drifted to the clock above the sink. At 1:16, conversations thinned. At 1:17, the room changed. Not dramatically, nothing cinematic, just a pressure, a stillness. One afternoon, I entered the break room at 1:18 because I had forgotten my lunch in the fridge. The room was full. 6 coworkers stood or sat in complete silence, facing the far wall. Not moving, not even pretending to be natural. The fridge hummed. The overhead light buzzed with that thin electrical whine that gets into your teeth. No one looked at me. At first I thought there had been an emergency. Then I saw their faces. White, fixed, listening. What's going on? Nobody answered. Celia stood by the sink with both hands braced on the counter as if holding herself upright. Her mouth was slightly open. Arjun's eyes were wide, not on me, but on the digital clock above the microwave. 1:18. Then very slowly, everyone exhaled, like they had been holding their breath. Celia turned to me and said, with a tremor so small I almost missed it, "Please don't come in here after 1:17. That night, I could not sleep. The apartment was too quiet. The radiator hissed. Rain pattered against the window in a fine, persistent rhythm. At 1:16 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Just one line. You should listen when people tell you not to be seen. I sat up so fast my shoulder cramped. The message disappeared before I could reply. I called the number back. Disconnected. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it was a scam. Maybe some idiot had sent the wrong text. Then another notification came in. A voice note. No sender name. No picture. I pressed play. At first there was only breathing. Close. Controlled. Then a faint office sound, the humming appliance tone I knew too well, and then Daniel's voice, low and calm. Don't look at the clock in the break room after 1:17. It notices. I dropped the phone. The screen cracked when it hit the floor. My mouth went dry. My skin felt too tight. The recording was impossible. Or fake. Or edited. But the voice was his. The exact measured softness. The little pauses. The way he ended sentences like he was leaning in to listen. The next morning, Daniel was waiting for me by the elevators. You got my message, he said. I froze. What message? He tilted his head. The one that asked you to stop pretending. I said nothing. He looked tired suddenly. Not threatening. Worse. Sympathetic. You're going to think this is about me, he said. It is not. Not really. What does that mean? His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It means the break room is the only place it can't track everyone at once. The cameras in there are old. The signal breaks. The door frame interrupts the pattern. After 1:17, it starts narrowing in on whoever is most isolated. I stared at him. He said it like he was explaining a software bug. I know how this sounds, he added. I do, but I'm trying to keep you alive. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to call security. I wanted to laugh in his face. Instead I said, who are you? Something shifted in his expression. Not guilt, recognition. I've had a few names, he said. That was the first time I felt real fear. Not because of the words themselves, because he said them without pride, without hesitation, like he had practiced being temporary. Over the next few days, the signs multiplied. A fake LinkedIn profile appeared under my name with a job title I had never held. A dating app match sent me a message that began, "Are you still going to that cafe on Mercer with the red chairs?" I had never told anyone about Mercer. My apartment buzzer rang once at 2:03 a.m., and when I checked the camera, there was only fog and a man-shaped blur in the reflection of the lobby glass. Then I found the email. From my own address. To myself. Subject, you told me not to leave you. The body contained a transcript of a conversation I had never had. It included phrases I had said in private, to no one, while crying into my pillow. It mentioned the name Mara used only once, in my kitchen, years ago, when she had laughed after I confessed a fear I had never repeated. My hands shook so badly I had to sit on the floor. When I showed Celia, she closed the door to the break room before reading it. How long have you known? I asked. She hesitated. Too long, I thought. Not the details, she said. Just that there were people who disappeared into it. Into what? She looked at the clock. 1:14 p.m. Then at the microwave. Then at me. We call it the noticing, she said. That is the only word anyone ever agreed on. My throat tightened. This is insane. I know. Tell me what it is. Celia's face went pale, not with fear, but with memory. It started with a contractor, she said. Then another. Then an intern. They all said the same thing. Someone knew things. Then they said they'd heard themselves on recordings. Then they stopped coming to work. I should have left right then. But Daniel was outside the door, waiting in the hallway, and I heard his voice through the wood. She's already in it, he said softly. Don't make her worse by lying. Celia shut her eyes. The room seemed to tilt. Daniel came in only when the clock changed. 1:17. Everyone stopped breathing. He stood in the doorway, looking at us the way one might look at people trapped behind glass. His phone was in his hand. On the screen, a live audio waveform moved in response to the stillness in the room. That's enough, he said, not loudly. It knows you're all awake. What are you? I whispered. He looked at me with something almost like grief. A translator, he said. Someone who learned how to speak to it using people. He told us everything, or enough of it. Not supernatural. Not in the way horror films lie and say. Something worse. Human. Scalable. Built from obsession and data and pattern recognition, and the kind of intimate surveillance that never needs to touch you to own you. He had worked for a private security contractor that tested behavioral systems in office environments. Audio cues, presence mapping, predictive models, facial recognition stitched together with location metadata, old public posts, voice clones scraped from voicemails and accidental recordings. It learned people, not all at once, slowly, like a parasite learning the shape of a body. The break room had become the blind spot. The old cameras created enough signal noise to interrupt its certainty. At 1:17, when the adjacent buildings changed light angles and the service elevator cycled, the pattern destabilized for exactly 1 minute. 1 minute to become invisible. I was listening, but I was also seeing all the other things now. The way Daniel knew too much. The way he had guided me toward fear while pretending to protect me. The way he had used comfort as a knife. You built this? I asked. I helped deploy it, he said. Then I tried to stop what it became. He smiled without humor. That is what people say when they are trying to sound less guilty. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time, the text was only a photograph. Me, sitting in my apartment window last night, taken from the building across the street. Behind me, the reflection of my room was visible in the glass. And in that reflection, a second figure stood in the doorway. I had not heard it enter. Celia made a small sound. Arjun swore under his breath. Daniel went still. I turned. The break room door was open. I had not seen it open. In the hallway, nothing moved except the slow pulse of the fluorescent light. Then I heard footsteps. Soft, measured, approaching. Daniel grabbed my wrist. Don't run, he said. It tracks movement first. That's your advice? It's the only one we have. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. A voice came from the hall. Mine. Not exactly mine. A little flatter. A little smoother. But close enough to make my stomach drop. You should have listened, it said. I could not breathe. Daniel shoved the microwave cart into the doorway and yelled for security. Celia was already dialing 911. Her fingers slipping on the screen. Arjun dragged the old metal cabinet forward with a screech that set my teeth on edge. The room erupted in clumsy human panic. Chairs scraping, phone buzzing, someone crying. The refrigerator hummed suddenly too loud. The door banged once, then again, and then, from somewhere in the building, alarms started to sound. Not fire alarms. Security. The kind that makes every hallway echo with urgency. The hallway cameras had been fed the wrong face. That was Daniel's doing, I learned later. He had built a false identity network and planted enough contradictory metadata to trigger internal detection. Fake profiles, burners, audio mismatches, ghost accounts. He had spent months poisoning the system that had once belonged to him. By the time police arrived, the man outside the break room was gone. But not before the evidence surfaced. A storage unit, 7 phones, printed face maps, voice cloning scripts, my own voice file among them, 5 other names, 5 other women. One of them had already filed a restraining order against an empty profile 3 cities away. Another had left the country. Another had vanished from social media, so completely it looked like she had died. Daniel was arrested the next morning. He did not resist. When they led him past me in the lobby, he looked almost gentle. "I was trying to keep the corridor clear," he said. I did not answer. He studied my face as if memorizing damage. "You still don't understand," he said quietly. "It doesn't need the room anymore. It learned your shape." Then they took him away. I gave my statement twice. I changed my number. I deleted my accounts. I moved my bed away from the window. I stopped answering unknown callers. I stopped using voice notes. For weeks, every sound in my apartment felt like a threat. The refrigerator, the pipes, the rain, the elevator outside. A floor creak from the building above me would send my heart into my throat. I kept expecting the city to feel different once he was gone. It did not. That was the hardest part. The neon still reflected in the wet streets. The cafes still played soft jazz too late into the night. People still crossed intersections with their coats pulled tight around them, their faces lit blue by their phones, their private lives leaking through screens in tiny, careless pieces. I began to understand that danger does not always arrive with force. Sometimes it arrives with attention. Sometimes it knows your favorite coffee order before you do. Sometimes it uses your own voice to ask whether you are alone. Sometimes it waits until you are already exhausted, already grieving, already lonely enough to mistake familiarity for safety. The break room rule stayed in place after the investigation. The company called it a temporary measure, a procedural inconvenience. But no one used the room after 1:17 anymore. No one joked about it. No one needed to. I went back once months later, just to prove to myself I could. The clock over the microwave read 1:16. The room was empty. The fridge hummed. The lights buzzed. Outside the window, rain blurred the city into silver streaks. I stood there, alone, and watched the second hand move toward 1:17. I did not wait for what might notice me. I left the room before the minute changed. Because trust is not the same thing as safety, and privacy is not the same thing as absence. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world is not being watched by a stranger. It is being understood by one. Story 5. When I moved into the city, the rain never seemed to stop. It came down in fine silver lines, turning every street into a smear of neon and wet pavement. Red taillights bled across the windows of passing buses. Cafes glowed warm against the cold. At night, my apartment was a box of silence with a refrigerator humming in the corner and pipes knocking inside the walls like a nervous finger. I had not meant to be living alone again. 3 months earlier, I had left my marriage in a stack of signed papers and a suitcase that still smelled faintly like my old perfume. There are some kinds of loneliness that feel dramatic at first. Mine was not. Mine was practical. It lived in empty hangars, unanswered messages, and the small, humiliating fact that I could hear my own breathing in bed. So when I got the new job, I told myself this would be the reset. A clean office, a clean commute, a clean life. That was before Adrian. He joined the team a week after me, though everyone spoke about him as if he had always been there. He was the first one in the office every morning. First to turn on the lights. First to refill the coffee. First to notice if someone's voice sounded tired, if a screen had frozen, if a paper cup had spilled. He had a calm face, open posture, soft voice, the kind of man people trusted before they knew why. He helped me carry boxes on my first day. "You don't have to do that," I told him when he took the heavier one from my hands. "I know," he said. That's why I'm doing it." He smiled like he understood something about me. I wanted to believe that was kindness. We worked on the same floor, under fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly ill. Around us, phones buzzed. Printers stuttered. Somewhere down the hall, someone always played soft jazz too quietly to identify. Adrian seemed to move through all of it without friction. He remembered names immediately. He remembered who took oat milk, who hated meetings after lunch, who had a dog with arthritis, who was trying to get pregnant, who was divorcing, who had stopped sleeping. People told him things. That was the strange part. They told him things they had not told me in 6 months. He would lean beside someone's desk with a sympathetic tilt of the head and say, "How's your mother doing?" Or, "Did the landlord ever fix that leak?" Or, "You sounded exhausted in your voice note last night." They always looked startled for a second, then relieved. "How did you know that?" they would ask. And Adrian would say, almost gently, "You mentioned it." Sometimes they would nod. Sometimes they would laugh. Once, I watched Nina from accounting stare at him blankly and say, "I don't think I did." Adrian just smiled. Maybe it was in passing. I remember that moment because it gave me a thin little shiver. I told myself it was nothing. People forget conversations all the time. Offices run on half-listened words and caffeine and stress. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I was still in the habit of scanning for danger because of my ex, who had trained my nervous system to treat silence like a warning. Adrian brought me coffee one Thursday morning, exactly the way I take it, without me ever having said it. 2 sugars. Oat milk. No lid because I hate the sound of steam trapped in plastic. I stared at the cup. He noticed. "You don't like lids," he said. I looked up. "How do you know that?" He shrugged. "You twist them too hard. Yesterday you almost dropped yours in the lobby." I had not remembered that. But maybe it was true. Maybe. That was his weapon. Not force. Not threat. Familiarity. The first truly impossible thing happened on a wet Tuesday night. I had stayed late to finish a presentation. The office was nearly empty. The cleaning staff had gone. The city outside was blurred by rain on the windows, and my desk lamp made a small island of light around my hands. At 11:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. A voice note from an unknown number. For a moment, I thought it might be my sister. Then I saw the thumbnail, a generic gray silhouette. No contact name. No subject. I played it. Static. A breath. Then Adrian's voice. Not just similar. His voice. He said my name like he was standing in my kitchen. "You should go home before midnight," the recording said softly. "The train platform is quieter after 11, but not safer. Take the side entrance. Not the front." The message ended. My skin went cold in a single wave. I looked at the office door, at the dark corridor beyond it, at the reflection of my face in the black glass of the window. Rain ticked against the pane like fingernails. I called the number back. It rang once and disconnected. Then I checked the office Slack. Adrian had posted 5 minutes earlier that he was heading out. I should have gone to security. I should have called the police. Instead, I sat there staring at my phone while the refrigerator in the break room hummed and the city breathed behind the glass. I told myself it was a prank, a stupid joke. Someone had spoofed his voice. AI could do that now. People were making fake voices, fake faces, fake lives every day. Still, my hands were shaking. The next morning, Adrian stopped by my desk with a paper bag of pastries. "I heard you stayed late," he said. I looked at him. "Did you call me last night?" His expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened, just slightly, like a camera adjusting focus. "No," he said. "Why?" The lie was so smooth I almost believed it. I said I had gotten a weird voicemail. He frowned with perfect concern. "Maybe someone dialed the wrong number," he said. "You should block it." I wanted to ask how he knew I had been at the office. I wanted to ask why his voice had been on my phone. But there was something about his calm that made my own certainty wobble. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it was a coincidence. I told myself it made sense. Then things began to multiply. He knew I went to the cafe on the corner every Friday because he was there before me, already sitting by the window with a black coffee, and a newspaper no one reads anymore. He knew I bought lemons from the small grocery 2 blocks from my apartment because he mentioned the price of them before I had taken my coat off. He knew the old nickname my father used to call me, the one nobody had said out loud in years. I had never told him. When I asked where he heard it, he smiled with that same mild, patient expression. "From your email signature," he said. "You signed something with it once, I think." That was nonsense, but it sounded plausible enough to let the unease slide back under the surface. At night, my apartment began to feel watched. Not haunted, watched. A car idling too long below my window. Footsteps in the hall stopping outside my door, and then moving on. The faint buzz of a phone at 2:13 a.m. only to find no missed call. My laptop waking on its own. A suggested login prompt I did not recognize. A fake profile on a dating app that had my first name, my city, my face blurred and repainted, matching my age, my likes, my job. The profile had one photo. Me on a street corner in the rain. I had never taken that picture. My throat tightened when I saw it. The background was the alley behind my building. The date stamp showed 3 weeks earlier. I stood in my apartment with the heating unit rattling against the wall and the city light leaking through the blinds in pale bars. The room felt too small for my body. I reported the account. Then another appeared. Then another. Different names. Different bios. Same smile in the cropped images. Same habits. Same favorite cafe. Same books. Same songs. One message said, "I think we've spoken before." Another, "You don't have to be alone anymore." Another, from a profile with no picture at all, "You forget me so easily." I blocked each one. Each time I blocked, another appeared. At work, I noticed something worse. People were forgetting him. Not all at once. Not dramatically. In fragments. Nina in accounting said she had never really spoken to Adrian, though I had seen her laugh with him by the printer the previous day. Marcus from legal frowned when I mentioned the coffee he'd brought into the weekly meeting and said, "Adrian who?" The name seemed to slide off him. Once, I overheard 2 co-workers discussing the new hire rotation. "One of the juniors," one said. "There's a new hire?" the other asked. I turned around so fast my chair squealed. Adrian was standing at the water cooler, watching me over the rim of his glass. His face was unreadable. Later, I found an email in my inbox from 3 months earlier. I had no memory of receiving it, no memory of opening it. It was from my own address. Subject, "Here if you need me." The body was only one line. "He knows how to sound like someone you trust." I stared at it for so long my eyes began to burn. Then my phone buzzed again. A voice note. This time I did not want to press play. I pressed it anyway. My own voice came through. Not exactly my voice. Slightly flattened. Cleaned. But enough to make my stomach drop. "It's okay," the recording said. "You can let him help. That's what he does." I dropped the phone so hard it hit the floor and skidded under the table. The apartment was silent except for the refrigerator hum and the rain. I called my sister. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I tried to text her, but her chat thread had vanished from my phone. Not deleted. Gone. Her number was still in my contacts, but the icon was blank. My hands went numb. I opened my laptop and searched my emails, my photos, my cloud backups, my socials. Files were missing. Messages disappeared. Images of my ex, my family, my old apartment, my past life, all rearranged or stripped away. It was not random. It was surgical. Someone was editing me. I almost laughed then. A terrible thin sound. Because what else was there to do when reality started behaving like a corrupted file? At 1:04 a.m., I heard a knock at my door. 3 soft taps. I froze. Another 3 taps. Patient. Familiar. Through the peephole, the hallway was lit in sick yellow. Adrian stood there with his hands folded in front of him, coat damp from the rain. I did not open the door. "Lena," he said through the wood, using my name as if he had every right to it. "I know this is upsetting. I know you're scared. But you don't have to make it worse." My heart slammed hard enough to hurt. "What do you want?" I said. A pause. Then quietly, I want you to remember me the way I remember you. My breath caught. He continued, almost kindly. You've been lonely for a long time. That makes people vulnerable. It doesn't make them stupid. I backed away from the door, phone in my hand, and called 911 with shaking fingers. When the operator answered, Adrian was still speaking. I can help you, he said. I already have. I told the operator there was a man at my door. I gave the address. My voice sounded far away, as if it belonged to someone else. Then Adrian said one sentence, soft enough that only I could hear it. You used to answer to Mara. My knees nearly gave out. Nobody had said that name in 10 years. Not since before the marriage. Not since before the city. Not since I had learned how to bury parts of myself under new signatures and new passwords and a new life. The operator was still talking. I could not hear her. All I could hear was my pulse and the rain and Adrian, waiting on the other side of the door like he had all the time in the world. I did not open it. By the time police arrived, Adrian was gone. They found no one in the hall, no one on the stairs, no one in the parking lot. But one of the officers, a tired woman with rain on her collar, looked at my phone and then at me and said, "He's done this before." They pulled records for weeks, then months, then years. Adrian was not Adrian. He had 6 names, at least. 3 phone numbers, burner devices, fake employment records, fake references, half a dozen social media accounts, dozens of dating profiles, more than 20 victims across different cities, each one isolated, each one emotionally compromised, each one slowly mapped and copied and worn down until pieces of them could be reused. Not killed, taken, their routines, their passwords, their old messages, their voices, their faces repackaged and repurposed. He collected people the way some men collect watches or passports or lies. He had done it carefully enough that by the time anyone noticed, they were already living inside the damage. The police found a storage unit 2 districts away. Inside were notebooks, printouts, screenshots, voice recordings, contact lists, maps of apartment buildings, coffee receipts, transit cards, handwritten schedules, a wall of names with arrows connecting them like a private constellation. Mine was there. So was Mara, my dead name, my old life, my first fracture. That was the worst part. Not that he had stalked me, that he had found the version of me I had worked hardest to hide. I spent the night in a hotel room with the curtains closed and the lamp on. Every appliance in the room hummed. The ice machine rattled in the hall. Sirens moved through the city like distant ghosts. I did not sleep. The next morning, I checked my phone and found a draft message in my notes app. I had not written it. It read, "You are not who you think you are." I stared at those words until they stopped looking like words. Maybe he had written it. Maybe he had opened something on my phone. Maybe he had been in my apartment after I left. Maybe the damage was deeper than the police could prove. Or maybe in the quietest corner of my fear, the worst thing had already happened. Not that he had stolen my data. Not that he had watched me. Not even that he had copied my voice. The worst thing was how easily he had reached into the place where I kept my identity and moved things around. Trust is a fragile architecture. Privacy is not the absence of love. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are the shape that keeps a person from being swallowed whole. I used to think danger looked like a knife in the dark, a stranger in an alley, a scream behind a door. Now I know it can arrive in a paper cup of coffee, in a soft voice, in a hand held out at exactly the right moment. It can learn your name before you remember your own. And even after it is gone, even after the police close the case and the screens go dark and the rain finally stops, you still wake sometimes to the sound of footsteps in the hall. Not because someone is there, because a part of you is still waiting for them to know you first. Story 6. The first time I noticed the Friday meeting, it was raining hard enough to blur the city into one gray wound. I was standing at my kitchen window with a cold cup of coffee in my hand, watching headlights smear across the wet street below my apartment. Somewhere across the block, a siren rose and fell. My radiator clicked like it was trying to remember how to work. The apartment was too quiet in the way empty places always are after a breakup. Not peaceful, just vacant. My ex had left 6 weeks earlier, taking his clothes, his favorite mug, and the version of me that used to believe apologies meant something. I had moved across town for the job after that. New district, new building, new routine. I told everyone I needed a fresh start. What I meant was I needed distance from the voice that still lived in my head. The one that said I was too sensitive, too suspicious, too much. So when the calendar invite appeared on Friday afternoon, I thought it was a mistake. Conference room C, weekly alignment meeting, 5:00 p.m. No organizer name, no department, no explanation. I hovered the cursor over it while fluorescent light hummed above my desk. Around me, the office was already thinning out for the weekend. Monitors dimmed. Chairs rolled back. Someone laughed near the elevators, the sound quick and bright before the doors sealed shut. I deleted the invite. 10 seconds later, it returned. I stared at it until my stomach tightened. Then I asked the only person on my floor, whoever seemed calm enough to answer a weird question without making me feel stupid. Leah. She worked in compliance, 2 rows over from me, with a voice so soft it made every conversation feel private. She was the kind of person who remembered the name of your coffee order and asked if you'd eaten lunch without sounding performative. In an office full of clipped emails and tired faces, she felt like warmth. I wanted to believe that warmth meant safety. "Did you get this?" I asked, turning my laptop toward her. She looked at the invite, then at me. Her expression barely changed, but something in her eyes did. Not fear, recognition. "Yeah," she said quietly. "It happens every Friday." "Who sends it?" "No one knows." "That's not reassuring." A small, tired smile touched her mouth. "No, it isn't." She didn't say anything else, and I let the subject die there. That was my first mistake. The meeting was scheduled in conference room C, a room no one ever seemed to use, and yet everyone seemed to avoid. The glass wall had a frosted stripe across the middle. The light inside was always on, even when the room was empty. I'd passed it a dozen times and never paid attention to the plaque by the door. Until that evening, the plaque was blank. Not broken, not removed, just blank, as if the room had never needed a name. At 5 o'clock, I was still at my desk, ignoring the invite, when 2 people from finance walked out of the room. They looked normal. That was the unsettling part. No blood, no screaming, no one dragging them out by the arms. Just 2 men in their 30s with their ties loosened, and their faces pale in the way people look after difficult news. But their eyes were wrong. Too smooth, too calm. One of them held the door for the other with a strange, polite smile. "See you Monday," he said, as if nothing in the world had changed. Then they walked past me without looking at my face. Leah was watching them too. "Do they seem weird to you?" I asked. "They're fine," she said. The answer landed strangely. Fine. That was not the word I would have used. The next Friday, the invite came again. Same time, same room, same blank organizer. I ignored it. Everyone ignored it, or pretended to. But at 5:02, the office grew quiet in a way I could feel in my teeth. Doors stopped opening. Conversations flattened. Even the printer in the copy room went still. Then the fire door at the end of the hall clicked shut. I looked up. Leah was standing beside my desk with 2 paper cups of coffee, the steam fading into the air between us. "You look like you haven't slept," she said. "I haven't." She set 1 cup down. "You should drink something." I didn't want to, but I did. The coffee was bitter and too hot, burning my tongue. I remember because the pain felt useful, real. My body was still mine. "Do you ever go to the meeting?" I asked. Leah lowered herself into the empty chair beside me. Her skirt brushed the edge of the desk. Outside the glass, rain thickened against the windows. Neon from the street below cast a faint pink reflection across her cheek. "Sometimes," she said. "What is it?" She took a slow breath. "I think," she said, "it's for people who have trouble saying certain things out loud." "That's vague." "It has to be." There was something in her tone, that made me look at her more closely. She seemed tired, but not in the ordinary way. More like someone carrying a memory they didn't want to name. "Did you go last week?" I asked. She nodded once. "And?" Her gaze shifted toward the conference room door. "When I came out," she said, "I didn't care as much about things that used to hurt." I laughed softly because that sounded absurd. "That's not how rooms work." "No," she said. "It's how people work in rooms." Then she stood and left me with my coffee and the hum of the lights. I wanted to believe it made sense. Maybe it was some corporate wellness thing, some illegal HR experiment, some panic-inducing nonsense designed to make people easier to manage. My job had enough strange policies already. I told myself I was overthinking it because I was lonely, because I still checked my phone for messages from my ex that I knew would never be kind, because my dating app inbox had turned into a graveyard of half-hearted conversation and fake sincerity. I had been duped before. That made me easy to doubt. So when my phone buzzed at 11:14 that night and a voice note arrived from a number I didn't recognize, I almost didn't open it. I did anyway. It was my ex's voice. Not exactly. Better than that. Cleaner. Softer. The pauses were wrong, but the rhythm was close enough to make my chest tighten. "You always did this," the voice said. "You make a small thing into a crisis." The file ended. My hand went cold around the phone. I checked the metadata. The file had been created 2 hours earlier from inside the building. I did not sleep. On Monday morning, Leah found me staring at the conference room across the hall. "You should not keep checking it," she said. "Why?" "Because the room notices." I turned to her. "You hear how insane that sounds, right?" She gave me a long look. Not offended, not defensive, just sad. "I know," she said. "That's why it works." At 4:47 p.m. the next Friday, someone from IT left a stack of laminated visitor badges on the shared printer. No explanation, no email. One of them had my name already printed on it. Beside it was a handwritten note. "You were referred." I laughed once, humorlessly, and slipped the badge into my pocket anyway. I told myself I was keeping it as proof. That was a lie. I was curious. Curiosity, I learned, can dress itself up as courage. At 4:58, Leah stood. "You don't have to go," she said. "Then why do you look like you think I should?" She held my gaze for a moment. "Because if you don't go willingly, someone will bring you later." The blood drained from my face. She softened immediately, like she regretted saying too much. "I didn't mean to scare you." "Then don't talk like that." "I'm sorry." She lowered her voice. "I just don't want you to learn about it the hard way." There was a calmness to her that no longer felt gentle. It felt cultivated, like a tone practiced until it could survive scrutiny. At 5 o'clock exactly, the conference room door opened. No one was standing in the hall. I should have left. Instead, I went in. The room smelled faintly of whiteboard marker and something sharper underneath. Disinfectant, maybe. The blinds were half closed. A speaker sat in the corner, playing the kind of music you barely notice unless it stops. Soft jazz. Piano notes floating under the noise of rain on glass. 3 people sat around the table. One was my department head, Greg, who never remembered my name unless he was asking me to stay late. Another was a woman from payroll, pale and perfectly upright, her expression serene in the way monks and paintings look serene. The third was Leah. At the head of the table sat a man I had never seen before. Mid-40s, expensive coat, kind eyes that did not feel kind at all. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice was calm enough to be mistaken for respect. "I'm sorry," I said, my pulse climbing. "I think there's been some confusion." "There's always confusion at first," he said. "That's not unusual." He glanced at the badge on my chest. "You're newer than most." "That's not an answer." "No," he said. "It's an observation." He introduced himself as Adrian Vale. Consultant. Conflict resolution. Organizational retention. His title changed twice during the conversation, like he was choosing the version of himself best suited to the room. "I work with companies facing high internal stress," he said. "Burnout. Litigation risk. Reputational exposure. Sometimes employees bring in more than skills. They bring fear, guilt, shame, things that destabilize teams. Leah sat very still beside him. "What does that have to do with me?" I asked. Adrian smiled lightly. "You'd be surprised how much of an organization is held together by unmanaged emotion." I felt the room close in around me. "Is this some kind of therapy?" "Not exactly." Then he gestured to the speaker, and the music lowered. A second later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked down. There was a message from my ex. "I never meant to hurt you. I just needed you quiet. Asterisk asterisk." My throat tightened. I had blocked him on everything. Adrian watched my face carefully. "It may help to know," he said, "that people often use your privacy against you because they assume you won't believe what you find." I didn't move. Leah finally spoke. "You noticed the Friday meeting because you still carry guilt like it's a live wire." My eyes snapped to her. She didn't look away. "I don't know what that means," I said. "You do," she replied. And I did. Not fully. Not yet. But enough. My ex had trained me to feel responsible for every silence in a room, every tension, every bad mood. He had called it honesty when he repeated my private fears back to me in a voice calm enough to sound like reason. He had made me apologize for things I hadn't done until even my instincts felt unreliable. Adrian leaned forward. "This room doesn't hurt people," he said. "It reduces resistance. Some call that peace. Some call that numbness. What is in here? Sound dampening, ocular lighting, temperature control, mild chemical agents in the ventilation system, language pattern intervention through repetition. It's remarkable what the body will relinquish when it learns there is no point holding on." I stared at him. "You drug people." He didn't answer directly. "Some leave calmer," he said. "Some leave cleaner, less haunted by inconvenient loyalties." Leah's face had gone almost blank. I looked at her, and suddenly I saw it. The way she stood too straight, the precision in her words, the careful distance. Not kindness, conditioning. "Did it do that to you?" I asked. Something moved behind her eyes. Grief, maybe, or memory trying to surface and failing. Before she could answer, the room behind me opened again. Two men from finance entered with blank expressions and polite smiles. One of them said, "Sorry we're late." His tone was soft, controlled. There was no fear in his face, no guilt, just a terrible, polished calm. I turned toward the door, my hand already moving for the badge clip at my collar. Adrian spoke behind me. "If you leave now," he said, "you'll keep carrying everything they taught you to carry. Some people prefer that, but it's heavier than it looks." I looked back at him. "You're making people less human." "No," he said, "we're making them easier to live with." The nausea that hit me then was not from the room. It was from recognizing the shape of the lie. They were not removing pain. They were removing the alarm system. The fear that said this is wrong. The guilt that said I harmed someone. The hesitation that made cruelty harder to repeat. The room was not killing people. It was sanding down the edges that made them stop. I backed toward the door. Adrian didn't stop me. He only said, almost gently, "You'll be relieved how quickly you adapt." That was the worst thing anyone had said to me in years. I left without looking back. In the hallway, I nearly collided with a security guard, then with Greg. He nodded at me like we were colleagues after a productive meeting. His face was calm. His voice was polite. "Everything okay?" I stared at him, and for one impossible second, I wondered if he was sincere. That was when I understood how dangerous the room really was. Not because it created monsters, because it made monsters seem reasonable. I went straight to the police. They listened badly at first, then better when I showed them the invite logs, the notes, the hidden contract file in the company server, the voice note with my ex's cloned voice, the strange metadata tied to the building's internal network, the chemical supplier invoices, the repeated calendar events hidden under different labels, the recordings I'd made on my phone through the half-open conference room door. Enough evidence to make a warrant happen, not enough to make me feel safe. When the police returned with me that night, conference room C was empty. The blinds were open, The table was gone. Not moved. Gone. The plaque outside the door now read Training Suite B. One officer cursed under his breath. Another checked the room again. The carpet still smelled faintly of rainwater and disinfectant. In the vent above the ceiling tile, they found a hidden cartridge and a microspeaker array. Adrian Vale was gone. So was Leah. The company claimed they had never heard of either one. But I knew what I saw. 3 employees filed complaints after the raid. 2 of them asked not to be named. One cried the entire time she spoke to investigators because she said she couldn't remember why she had stopped feeling afraid of her husband after the meeting. That part stayed with me. The room had not erased pain. It had erased the part of us that used pain to protect us. Months later, I still catch myself checking conference rooms before I pass them. I still flinch when an invite appears without a sender. I still feel my body tighten when someone is too calm, too polished, too eager to make everything understandable. The apartment is quieter now. The radiator still clicks. The city still hums below my window. Rain still turns neon into bruised light on the glass. I still make coffee too late at night and sit by the window pretending I am not listening for footsteps in the hall. But I am different. Not healed. Not fixed. Just harder to reach. There is a kind of damage that does not leave bruises. It leaves clarity. It teaches you that privacy is not a luxury. It is a shield. That guilt can be used like a leash. That trust, once manipulated enough times, stops feeling like a gift and starts feeling like a risk assessment. And sometimes I think about those people who came out of that room so calm, so polite, so distant. I think about how easy it is to mistake the absence of fear for peace. I think about how often the world asks us to be less human in order to be easier to handle. Then I turn off the light, and in the silence, with the rain tapping softly against the glass, I remember the most frightening thing of all. The line between safety and obedience can be made very thin. Story 7. I found the keycard at 6:14 p.m., lying on the floor outside the break room, just beneath the humming vending machine. Wet from the drizzle seeping through the cracked window, corners curling slightly. On top of it, a note scrawled in small, precise letters. Do not let it in. I stared at it until my coffee went cold. The office was emptying for the evening. Rain tapped the windows in a steady rhythm. Neon from the street outside cut through the foggy glass, stretching long, liquid streaks across the linoleum floor. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, then receded. I picked up the keycard, turned it over in my hand. It didn't belong to me. I didn't even recognize the badge number. A laugh came from the corner of the office. Derek, leaning against his cubicle wall, smiling. Lost something? I hesitated. Do you know whose this is? He shook his head. Looks like someone's playing office pranks. Maybe a late-night scavenger hunt. I nodded. I wanted to believe it. Maybe I was overthinking. Later, when I left the office, the keycard had vanished. My life had been quiet lately. Too quiet. I'd moved across state lines after a messy divorce, leaving behind a city that smelled of stale coffee and old arguments. I still carried the echo of his voice, the way it curled around my confidence and squeezed it down to nothing. I thought this office, with its fluorescent lights and soft jazz piped through the lobby, would be a sanctuary, a place to rebuild. That illusion crumbled faster than I could say, do not let it in. The first week, I saw the keycard twice more. On my desk when I returned from lunch. Under my chair while I worked late. Always accompanied by the same note. Each time, I wondered if I had left it somewhere and simply forgot. Each time, my rational mind whispered, it's nothing. Stop imagining. But the note never felt like a joke. It felt urgent. I started noticing details about Derek I hadn't before. The way he always hummed a tune under his breath when he was nervous. How he knew exactly which mug I preferred in the kitchen. He asked if I liked black coffee, no sugar. He remembered the playlist I'd left open on Spotify weeks earlier. I just pay attention, he said when I remarked on it once. His smile was calm, comfortable, safe. I wanted to believe it. Then one evening, Angela stayed late. She laughed when I showed her the key card, tossing it onto my desk. You're imagining things, Maya. "It's just some prank," she said, brushing rain from her coat. I told myself it made sense. Maybe she was right. The next morning, she was gone. No one saw her leave. Her desk was empty, her phone unresponsive. An email waiting in my inbox simply read, "We'll handle it. Don't follow." The office felt different after that. Shadows lingered longer in the hallways. The hum of the fridge in the break room became a low, constant pulse in my ears. My phone buzzed late at night. Unknown numbers. "You're looking at it wrong. It's already inside." I tried to trace the numbers. Nothing. Burner phones, emails scrubbed through VPNs, metadata stripped clean. Derek was the only person who seemed to notice my tension. He slid a cup of coffee toward me one rainy evening, warm fingers brushing mine, careful, deliberate. "You look like hell," he said quietly. His voice was gentle, observant. "Want to talk about it?" I told him fragments, half-truths. He listened, and he knew things he shouldn't. The exact song I hummed in the elevator when no one was around. The nickname my ex used for me in texts I thought were long deleted. My favorite cafe, the one I went to at 7:17 a.m. on Tuesdays. I rationalized it. I told myself he just noticed. That I was too paranoid. I wanted to believe it. The key card kept moving. I found it in the office kitchen, tucked inside the sugar canister. In my bag, behind the reception desk, always with that same note. And each time, the feeling of being watched tightened like a rope around my chest. I began checking every corner, every camera feed I could access. No one ever appeared on security that shouldn't have been there. The cameras were old, low resolution, but everything seemed normal. Yet I could feel the surveillance. One night, I stayed late, working on spreadsheets. Rain thrummed against the windows. My laptop hummed. Derek's soft footsteps approached. He leaned on the desk, watching me with the faintest smile. "You're doing it wrong," he whispered, nodding toward the key card in my hand. "What do you mean?" "You think it's lost. It's not. It's being passed around. The office, it protects itself. It keeps something outside." I froze. "You have to trust it," he said. Calm. Precise. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence. "Do not let it in." Days turned into nights of obsession. I followed the key card, watched Coworker's subtle movements, traced every hand that might have touched it. Each time, I felt the building breathe, alive and knowing. The hum of the servers, the faint jazz leaking from the lobby, footsteps creaking on the floor above. Then finally I saw it. In the stairwell, a hand slipped the key card from one pocket to another. Not Derek's, not Angela's, not mine. A rotation of hands, each coworker participating, passing it like a baton in a silent ritual. It wasn't lost. It was never lost. It was a ward, a shield. Something outside the office had been kept at bay by their careful, coordinated circulation of the key card. The horror was simple, pragmatic, human, and yet intimate. Every interaction I'd had, every comforting word from Derek, had been observed, evaluated, used to manipulate me. He wasn't evil in the flamboyant sense. He was precise, calculated, a caretaker, a manipulator, a gatekeeper for something I couldn't even name. It escalated quickly after that. The key card slipped under my office door with a new note. "You need to see the door. Tonight." I wanted to rationalize it. I tried, but the pull of curiosity, of fear, was stronger. The stairwell at 2 a.m. was cold, wet with condensation. The building groaned. I could hear distant music from a cafe 3 blocks away, muffled through fog. And then the door. The last page of the key card's instructions. Do not let it in. Do not let it touch the office. Behind it, I glimpsed a shape. Something outside the fluorescent cage of the office, something I could not identify. The rational part of my brain screamed to run. But curiosity edged forward. I turned, and Derek was there. Calm, observant, watching. "You're ready," he said. I didn't know if he meant to protect me or control me. The police came hours later. Evidence collected. Cameras examined. Burners traced. Emails recovered. The coworkers confirmed what I had seen. The key card was a rotating defense, a measure against something outside the door that they wouldn't talk about directly. The shape, the thing, was never identified, but the manipulation, the careful orchestration of fear and trust was Derek. His real identity, a former security contractor with multiple identities, obsessed with control. He had observed everyone, learned their habits, and constructed a protective circle around the office using fear, attention, and subtle psychological nudges. Every comforting word, every shared secret, every intimate moment, calculated to maintain the ritual. I moved again, changed my number, my email, my routines. Left the office behind. Rain still taps my window sometimes. I hear the soft hum of old appliances, the distant echo of jazz and late-night cafes. I wonder how many others live in lives orchestrated by invisible rules. How many people trust what seems comforting while fear, structured and precise, shapes every movement. The keycard taught me something impossible and terrifyingly simple. Boundaries are fragile. Trust is earned and observed. Obsession can be disguised as care. Safety is not the absence of fear. It is the control of what enters your life. I survive, but every new door, every note, every warning sign now carries a weight I cannot ignore. And sometimes I think about the office, the missing keycard, the shape beyond the door. And I realize control is a story, and someone always writes it. Story 8. The rain had been falling since morning, thin and steady, turning the city into a set of blurred lights and wet asphalt. From the 8th floor, the office windows looked down on neon reflections and taxi wakes and people hurrying under umbrellas like they were being erased in real time. I was already living like that, half unpacked, half divorced, half convinced I had made the right decision by taking a job 2 train lines away from the apartment Mara and I had once shared. The silence in my new place felt too large at night. The refrigerator hummed. The pipes clicked. My phone lit up with old messages I kept meaning to delete. Sometimes I would lie on the couch and listen to rain tapping the window and think that if I stayed still enough, my life might stop asking me questions. The management position opened in late October. Everyone wanted it. Everyone pretended not to. The announcement came by email first, then in a meeting that lasted 12 minutes and told us almost nothing. HR said the choice had already been made. They said the final conversation would happen privately. They said not to speculate. That kind of language only makes people speculate harder. At lunch, the office was all low voices and the smell of reheated noodles and burnt coffee. The copier kept making a small clicking sound behind the wall. Someone in accounting was laughing too loudly at something on their screen. Outside, rain slid down the glass in silver threads. Leah sat across from me with her salad untouched. "You okay?" she asked. It was a simple question. She asked it like she meant it. Leah had that effect on people. Calm voice, soft eyes, the kind of presence that made a room feel less sharp around the edges. After my breakup, when I arrived at work with my face still carrying the residue of whatever had happened the night before, she was the only person who did not ask invasive questions. She just said, "You look like you've had a hard week," and handed me the extra napkins she kept in her drawer. I told myself I was lucky to have met someone kind. "I'm fine," I said. She gave me a look that said she did not believe me, but she did not push. That was another reason people trusted her. The announcement came 2 days later. Leah got the promotion. No celebration, no surprise. HR called her into a glass room, and by the time she came back, her face had gone very still. Not happy, not relieved, just arranged. Everyone congratulated her anyway. That is what office people do when they are trying not to notice fear. She smiled, thanked them, and went back to her desk. After that, she changed. Not all at once. Not in a way anyone could point to. She just became harder to reach. She started looking at the clock at odd moments. She stopped taking lunch with us and ate alone near the stairwell. Her phone buzzed constantly, but when she checked it, she never seemed surprised. Sometimes she would freeze while reading a message, then tuck the phone face down as if it had spoken too loudly. One evening, I stayed late to finish a report and found her at the printer, staring at a page she had already picked up. "You okay?" I asked. She laughed once. It sounded wrong. Too small. "Yeah," she said. "Just tired." The office was nearly empty. The air conditioner hummed above us. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed. Her reflection in the dark printer glass looked pale and far away. She lowered her voice. "Do you ever get the feeling the building is listening?" I almost smiled. "That's what you say when you've had too much coffee." "I'm serious." The tone in her voice stopped me. Then she shook her head, as if clearing it. "Never mind. Forget I said that." I wanted to ask more. I wanted to tell her she looked scared. I wanted to know what had happened in HR. But she was already walking away, one hand pressed briefly against her temple, as if she were trying to hold something in. That night, when I got home, there was a voicemail on my phone from an unknown number. No caller ID, just a voice note. I pressed play while standing in my kitchen, my shoes still damp from the rain. Leah's voice came through the speaker. "Don't stay after 6:40, it said softly. "Not if they ask you to. And don't open the north filing room without me." I called her immediately. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. "Hice na text. Are you messing with me?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then, not me. My skin went cold. The next day I watched her more closely. At her desk, she kept receiving messages from numbers that changed every hour. She read each one with the same fixed expression, like she was decoding instructions she did not want to obey. Once, when she thought no one was looking, she opened a burner phone from her bag. Old model. Cracked screen. The kind people buy when they do not want to be traced. I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe family issues. Maybe the promotion came with some absurd confidentiality clause. Maybe she was in trouble with someone. Maybe I was seeing patterns because I had been lonely long enough to mistake tension for intimacy. I wanted to believe it, but then she knew things. Not obvious things. Not work things. Small things. She brought me coffee one morning and said, "You always take it black when you're trying not to think about something." I stared at her. "You used to put cinnamon in it," she added. "Before your ex told you it was weird." I never told her that. My ex had only said that once, years ago, in our kitchen, while the apartment windows rattled in a storm. Leah saw my face and looked immediately sorry. "I shouldn't have said that. Who told you?" She looked toward the hall, then back at me. "You did, technically. What does that mean?" She swallowed. "Nothing." It was the first time I noticed she was afraid of being overheard. By the end of the week, I had started hearing things too. Not voices. Not at first. Footsteps in the hallway after everyone had gone home. The soft buzz of a phone vibrating inside a desk drawer. A faint click in the ceiling like someone shifting above us in the ventilation. Once at 6:39 I heard Leah whisper, "No, not that one," to no one at all. I stopped by her desk after everyone left. The overhead lights were half off. The office windows reflected the city in dark layers. Rain had turned the streets below into strips of black glass and red brake lights. Somewhere far away, a siren rose and faded. "What is going on?" I asked. She did not look up from her screen. "You should go home." "Leah." That made her pause. When she finally turned to me, there was a kind of exhaustion in her face I had only seen in people carrying terrible news. "They already decided," she said. "Decided what?" She hesitated. "Who has to keep it buried?" I remember laughing once, because the sentence was so absurd my body rejected it before my mind could. She did not. "I'm serious," she said quietly. "This promotion is not a promotion." "Then what is it?" Her gaze moved to the closed door. "A handoff." That night I could not sleep. My apartment was too quiet. The fridge hummed. Rain ticked at the window. My phone buzzed at 1:12 a.m. with an email from a sender labeled HR support. Subject, "Congratulations." No body. Just a PDF attachment. I opened it. It was an internal personnel memo, dated 7 years ago. The names had been redacted, but the language was specific enough to make my throat tighten. Transfer of custodial responsibility. Restricted archive access. Incident retention. Sealed records. Chain of custody verification. Annual compliance acknowledgement. At the bottom, in a font too plain to be accidental, one line repeated 3 times. The position is a guarantee of silence. The file also contained a photo. Our building, but older. Before the lobby renovation. Before the coffee kiosk. Before the bright art installed near reception to make it look human. In the basement entrance, half hidden behind a security door, a sign had been visible in the shot. Archive access, authorized personnel only. I went to work early the next morning and found the north filing room unlocked. Inside was a narrow concrete space with metal shelves, old binders, and a smell like dust, toner, and cold paper. My pulse was loud in my ears. The fluorescent light flickered once, then steadied. At the back, I found a locked cabinet marked with a label that looked decades old. Do not remove without management approval. The key was taped under the desk. Of course it was. Inside were files. Not on clients. On employees. Incidents. Complaints. Witness statements. Harassment claims that had vanished. Time-stamped reports about a maintenance accident in the basement from years earlier. One file kept appearing in different formats, each version edited differently. In the last copy, an employee had been found dead near a locked server room. The official explanation was equipment failure. The real notes mentioned panic, a broken internal door, and a recording system that had captured too much. Then I found Leah's name, not as the chosen manager, as the latest keeper. There had been others before her. 7 names, actually, each one marked with the same final notation. Transferred. Trained. Contained. A sound behind me made me turn too fast. Leah stood in the doorway, breathing hard, hair damp from the rain. You shouldn't have opened that, she said. I didn't know. Her eyes moved to the file in my hands. She looked less shocked than I expected, more resigned. Did they tell you? I asked. No. Then who did? For a moment she did not answer. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket, and the sound seemed to drain the color from her face. She pulled it out. The screen lit up with a voice note from a contact named Eli. She did not press play. She didn't need to. She whispered, "He knows when I'm not listening." Who is he? Leah's jaw tightened. The man who hired the last 3 managers. Under different names. I stared at her. She looked exhausted. Not dramatic. Not broken. Just worn thin by a pressure too constant to argue with. It's fake, she said. The names. The accounts. The voice notes. He uses cloned audio. Old meeting recordings. LinkedIn profiles. Burner phones. Different faces online. Different stories every time. He finds the ones who are lonely. Or ambitious. Usually both. My stomach turned. Why you? She gave a tired half-smile. Because I was good at pretending to be calm. The air in the room felt colder. What's in the files? She looked at the cabinet as if it might hear her answer. Everything they buried, she said. And the reason they need someone to keep guarding it. At that moment, the speaker in the ceiling crackled. A voice came through, warm and controlled. Leah. She went rigid. Take him to the archive room, the voice said. Now. I looked up. No speaker had been visible before. Who is that? I asked. Leah closed her eyes briefly, like she was bracing for a blow. Then she said, That's Eli. The archive room was below the basement, past 2 locked doors and a corridor that smelled of concrete dust and old electricity. The lights hummed overhead. My footsteps echoed too loudly. Leah walked beside me with her hands open, like she was trying to prove she was not carrying anything. I don't understand, I said. You will, she replied. We reached a steel door with no handle on the inside. She entered a code. The lock clicked. Inside was a room full of sealed cartons, server towers, and a desk with an old computer still powered on. On the screen was a live feed of the lobby. There were police cars outside. Blue lights strobed against the rain. I turned to Leah. You called them? No, she said. Then the voice came again, not from the speaker this time, but from a phone on the desk. My phone. It lit up with an incoming call labeled Eli. I had never given anyone that number. Leah's face changed then. Not fear exactly. Recognition. "He's been inside your devices," she said. I answered without meaning to. The voice on the other end was calm, familiar in the worst possible way. "Hello," it said. "You should have let her take the promotion." Then I heard another sound under the line. Breathing. Close. Real. A door somewhere behind the concrete wall opened. Leah moved before I did, snatching the burner phone from the desk and hurling it into the server racks. Sparks jumped. The call cut out. The hidden door at the end of the archive room slid open just enough for a man to step through. Middle-aged. Gray suit. No expression. The kind of face that disappears in a crowd because it has been trained to be forgettable. He looked at me, then at Leah, and sighed as if we had inconvenienced him. "You were doing well," he said to her. Leah's voice was flat. "I'm done." "You're never done," he said. "That's what the position is for." Outside, muffled through concrete, I heard police shouting in the lobby. Someone had tipped them off. I would later learn Leah had done it 3 days earlier, using a dead email account and a leaked packet she had been building for months. He must have known that too. The man's gaze slid to me. "You think this is about a promotion," he said. "It's about inheritance. Someone has to keep the room closed. Someone has to keep the names from surfacing. Someone has to answer the questions when the wrong file goes missing." "Who are you?" I asked. He almost smiled. "Whoever is left," he said. Then he looked at Leah. "You were supposed to hand this over quietly." "I know," she said. And instead, she held up her phone. "Instead, I kept copies." The next minute happened fast and slow at once. Police breaking into the hall. A shout. A crash. The man lunging for the desk. Leah shoving the file box into my arms. Metal scraping. Someone shouting my name from far away. The server lights flickering. The room filling with noise and motion, and the ugly, human sound of people finally catching up to what had been hidden. By the time it ended, the man was on the floor in handcuffs. The police had the files. The archive room was open. Not physically open, still locked behind concrete and steel, but exposed. Documented. No longer protected by silence. Leah sat on the basement stairs later, wet hair stuck to her cheek, looking older than she had that morning. "They'll call it a fraud case," she said. I sat beside her, unable to stop shaking. "Is that what it was?" She looked at the files in the police bag. "It was a machine," she said, "and we were the parts that thought we were people." The rain kept falling outside. The city lights wavered in the wet glass. Somewhere above us, a door slammed. A phone buzzed. Someone coughed. The building kept breathing like nothing had happened. I went home near dawn. My apartment was exactly as I had left it. The fridge hummed. The pipes clicked. A taxi hissed past below my window, tires cutting through standing water. I stood there for a long time with my hands in my pockets, staring at my reflection in the black window glass. I had survived something I could not name cleanly. That is what stays with me now. Not the man in the gray suit. Not the files. Not even the lie of the promotion. It is the feeling of how easily a person can be assigned a role and mistaken for consent. How a company can bury a secret and then call it structure. How loneliness makes a lock seem like a door. How someone can look at you with kindness, learn your habits, your favorite coffee, the song you played when you thought no one could hear, and use that knowledge either to save you or own you. I do not trust offices now. I do not trust polished smiles or private conversations behind glass. I do not trust when someone says, "We already made the decision," because sometimes what they mean is this: the job was never the reward. It was the burden of keeping the truth from breathing. Story 9. The first time Mara asked me to swap shifts, it was raining so hard the windows of the diner looked like they were melting. I was standing behind the register with my hair pinned up badly, staring at the clock and trying not to think about the apartment I would go back to later. The one with the broken lamp. The one with one plate in the cabinet. The one that still felt too large for one person. I had moved across the city 3 months after the breakup, but the breakup had followed me anyway. It had a way of lingering in the corners, in the silence after midnight, in the small pauses between texts that never came. My ex used to say I was too sensitive, which is a clean way to make a person doubt their own nervous system. Since then, I had learned to live carefully inside my own head. Mara was new to the overnight crew. Quiet, efficient, pale in the fluorescent light. She wore a black beanie even indoors, and her voice was soft enough that customers leaned in when she spoke. She came up beside me while the coffee machine hissed and the grill crackled in the back. "You mind taking Friday for me?" she asked. "I can cover Thursday." I looked at the schedule board. 2 shifts. Same pay. Same hours. It sounded harmless. "I guess," I said. She gave a small smile. "You're a lifesaver." That was how it began. Not with dread. With routine. By the second swap, it had become normal. If she needed Friday, I took it. If I needed Sunday, she covered. We stopped asking too many questions. The manager loved it. Less trouble. Better coverage. The world likes anything that looks efficient. But after every swap, something strange happened. The next day, one of us would look at the other and go quiet. "You okay?" I asked Mara once while wiping the counter near the window. Outside, neon from the pharmacy across the street bled across the wet pavement. She hesitated. "You look exhausted," she said. I laughed once, uncertain. "I'm fine." No, her eyes moved over my face like she was checking for damage. "I mean, really exhausted. Like you didn't sleep." I wanted to dismiss it. I wanted to say she was imagining things. But later that night, when I checked the reflection of my face in the dark diner window, I did look wrong. Pale. Shrunken. My mouth too tight. The next time I saw her after a swap, it was the same. She stared at me for a second too long, her hand still on a tray. "You got taller," she said quietly. I blinked. "I don't think that's possible." Her expression did not change. Maybe not. There was no joke in her voice. I told myself I was overthinking it. People say odd things when they are tired. Maybe the night shift made us both strange. Maybe the stale coffee and artificial light were making everything feel more charged than it was. Still, a feeling started growing under my ribs. Small at first, then persistent. On Wednesdays, when I got home, I would find tiny things changed in my apartment. The kitchen chair turned a few inches toward the window. My phone charger unplugged. The living room lamp switched on, though I was certain I had left it off. Once, I found a paper coffee sleeve on the counter from the diner. Mine, except I had not brought it home. I lived alone. I checked my locks every night. I knew the sound of my own door. I knew the exact pitch of the floorboards near the bathroom sink. I knew when the fridge motor kicked in. I knew the silence of the apartment by heart. So I noticed when it changed. I started paying attention to the schedule app on my phone. It was linked to work, and every shift swap appeared there automatically. Mara's name. Mine. The clean little blocks of time. Then one Friday, I checked it and found something impossible. A swap I had not accepted. My shift had been changed from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. by a name that didn't belong to anyone on staff. No notifications. No approval request. Just edited. Quietly. I opened the details and saw the metadata. The change had been made from a device logged in under my account. I stared at the screen until the room seemed to tilt. My phone buzzed. "Mara, did you see the new schedule?" I typed back. I didn't change anything. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Returned. "Mara, I know." Neither did I. A minute later. "Mara, you need to check the calendar on your laptop." My hands were cold when I opened it. The work calendar was different there too. Not just the swap. Entire entries were missing and reappearing. Notes I did not remember writing. Shift confirmations. Reminders. A meeting I had no memory of attending. A message in the comments section that simply read, "She was crying again after the swap." I felt my throat tighten. I did not know what that meant. Or I did, and I hated the shape of it. I called Mara from the back steps of the diner, standing under the weak awning while rain tapped hard against the metal edge above me. Traffic hissed through the street. Somewhere a siren moved past and then faded. She answered on the second ring. "Did you write this?" I asked. No. Did you log into my account? I don't even know your password. Her voice was too steady. That scared me more than panic would have. There was a pause. Then she said, "Can you come in early tomorrow?" "Why?" "I need to show you something." The next morning, she was already there when I arrived. That was normal. What was not normal was how she looked. Tired in a way that seemed deeper than lack of sleep. Her makeup was absent. Her hands shook when she poured coffee. She did not look like herself. Or maybe she looked more like herself than before. It is hard to say which. She led me to the booth in the corner, the one nearest the front window. Rain streaked the glass in silvery lines. The city outside was a blur of headlights and wet pavement. She placed her phone on the table. "Look at the timestamps," she said. I did. There were voice notes, messages, call logs, all between us. All in the nights we had supposedly swapped. One of the voice notes was from me. Except it was not. It sounded like me after crying. Softer, fainter, a little slower. "I can't do this anymore," the voice said. "Please stop taking my shifts." I pulled back so fast my shoulder hit the booth. "That's not me." Mara's eyes were glossy, but she did not look surprised. "I know." I swallowed. "Then who sent it?" She stared at me for a second too long. Then she said, "I think it's using both of us." The words sat between us like a bad smell. We looked at each other without speaking. The espresso machine hissed behind the counter. A spoon clinked against ceramic somewhere in the kitchen. Soft jazz leaked from a speaker overhead, too low to identify. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to tell her this was paranoia from too many overnights and too little sleep. Instead I whispered, "What do you mean?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a printed stack of screenshots. Calendar entries, shift records, messages, photos. In one photo, I was standing outside my apartment building at midnight. In another, Mara was inside the diner, staring at the camera with a face I had never seen before. Too pale, too still. "We've been swapping shifts for weeks," she said. "But not every time. Only sometimes. I don't understand." She ran a hand through her hair, and for the first time I saw fear on her face. Real fear. "I checked the building cams," she said. "On some nights, I leave at the end of my shift. On others, I don't." I stared at her. She said it slowly, as if speaking to someone who might bolt. "There are nights where I go home, and nights where something that looks like me stays." The diner felt colder after that, not because the heat was off, because my body had begun to understand something my mind had not yet accepted. Mara leaned closer. "I think there's been a third person editing everything." I looked at her. "A coworker?" She shook her head. "No, I think it's pretending." My mouth went dry. She slid a burner phone across the table. "Call this number," she said. "Not from your phone." I hesitated. Then I did it. The call rang once, twice. Then someone answered with my own voice. "Hello." I nearly dropped the phone. Mara went white. The voice on the other end was calm, polite, familiar in the worst way. It sounded like me when I was trying not to sound hurt. I stood up so fast the booth scraped against the floor. The voice continued. "You're both doing very well. Better than expected." The line went dead. My pulse was loud enough to feel in my teeth. We went to the manager together and showed him the screenshots. He frowned, squinting at the screen, impatient in that way managers get when reality starts interfering with payroll. He said maybe someone was messing with the app. Maybe a glitch. Maybe we were both overworked. Mara looked at him and said, "Then explain why the calendar edited itself." He looked irritated. Then he went silent, because his own laptop had just lit up on the counter behind him. An email was open, from his account. Subject, shift coverage confirmed. The body contained a single line. They forget faster when they trust the pattern. No one spoke for a moment. Then the lights flickered. Not dramatically, just enough to make the room blink. The kitchen radio crackled, and from somewhere in the back hallway, I heard footsteps. Slow, measured, coming closer. The manager turned first. He said, "Who's back there?" No answer. The footsteps stopped. Then a figure stepped into the doorway between the kitchen and the hall. Mara, or something wearing Mara. At first glance, it was her. Same height, same hair under the beanie, same black coat damp from the rain. But the face was wrong in a way I cannot fully explain. Not distorted, not monstrous, just slightly unfinished. As if the human details had been assembled from memory and reference photos, and some crucial thing had been missed. Its eyes moved from the manager to me. It smiled. Mara said, in a voice that was almost hers, "I'm here for the swap." The manager made a sound behind me. Small, confused. I moved before I understood I was moving. My body already knew what my mind was still refusing. I grabbed his desk chair and slammed it into the side of the counter. The crash shattered the moment. He stumbled back. Mara, no, not Mara, turned its head in a smooth, unnatural motion. The real Mara screamed, "Run!" We ran, out through the front door into rain and neon and the sharp cold of the street. I heard the diner door slam behind us, heard someone shouting, heard the manager yelling for police with a voice that kept cracking. We did not stop until we reached the corner under a flickering pharmacy sign. Mara was shaking. So was I. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She looked down. Her face went empty. "What?" I asked. She turned the screen toward me. A message from my number. It said, "You already swapped once. Check your apartment." Police arrived 20 minutes later. By then, the diner's surveillance system had corrupted. Not destroyed. Corrupted. Files overwritten, timestamps shifted, faces blurred into static. The officers took our statements separately. They asked ordinary questions with ordinary disbelief. Had anyone been following us? Had we taken any substances? Were we under unusual stress? We answered everything. Then one of the detectives opened the calendar logs and went very still. My apartment had been entered 3 times that month, according to the building key records. My key had not been used. Mara's name appeared on one of the entries, then vanished. The detective looked at me and said carefully, "Do you know how your schedule keeps changing?" I said no. He turned the screen toward me. The calendar was open. My shifts were listed, except one name was missing. Mine. In its place was a blank field. Not erased. Reserved. The rest of that night blurred into fluorescent hallways, paper cups of bad coffee, and the smell of rain drying off my coat in a police station chair. They found a second phone in the diner storage room, then another in the office above the lockers, burner devices, recording equipment, a laptop full of cloned audio, fake IDs, social profiles, and shift logs going back months. The thing using Mara had been watching the routines, testing access, learning who noticed, learning who could be rewritten. The real Mara, they told me later, had been found at a motel across town, alive and terrified and certain someone had been taking her place at work. She had never met me before the job. Not really. What we had swapped with was not another coworker. It was a constructed identity, a pattern, a shell, a thing made of schedules, voices, and borrowed habits that had learned how to occupy a person-shaped space long enough for the world to stop questioning it. The police never gave me a better word than that. I went back to my apartment at dawn with an escort. The rain had stopped. The streets were washed clean and empty. Storefronts reflected the first gray light of morning. My building smelled like damp concrete and old heat. Inside, nothing looked touched. That was the worst part. The apartment was exactly as I had left it. Except on the kitchen table, there was a folded schedule printout. My name had been crossed out in pen. Under it, in neat handwriting, one line remained. Shift swapped. I stood there listening to the refrigerator hum, listening to my own breathing, listening to the hollow silence of the room I had thought belonged to me. It did not feel haunted. It felt edited. I still work nights sometimes, but I check every calendar twice now. I cross-reference emails. I do not trust voice notes. I do not trust familiar names in unfamiliar places. I do not trust the comfort of someone who arrives too early, remembers too much, and never seems surprised by pain. Because I learned something in that diner under the rain. People think identity is a fixed thing. a name, a face, a record. It is not. Identity is also repetition. Habits, witnesses, the fragile agreement between memory and routine. Break that agreement, and a person can be made to doubt the shape of their own life. And if something learns how to live inside your pattern long enough, it does not have to become you. It only has to make the world stop noticing the difference.